This one is from Rafe Martin's The Hungry Tigress, Buddhist Myths, Legends, and Jataka Tales. Forward by Roshi Philip Kaplow, who was his original teacher, I think, his root teacher. So this is one of his early ones. And I've been looking at this tale about the rabbit and the moon, or the hare's sacrifice, since we began doing the Jatakas, and just didn't seem right. And now it seems right as we're sitting in the full moon circle of this study, the Jatakas, and all the animal beings and the spirit beings and the people beings, and each one of us that has brought forward, either through sharing it in Sangha, a story, or whatever has been touched and illumined in your heart in this time with these ancient bodhisattva tales of Buddha, the bodhisattva waking up to be the Buddha, which is all of us. The idea being that there is nothing we have not been, and no one who has not been us in this big, endless circle and turning of form and emptiness. And that the more we realize this, the more all we want to do is be kind, to cultivate wisdom, heart of compassion, because whatever the world is that we think is or isn't, whatever part of us feels the beauty and the suffering of the world, it's all us. And that we are actually way more powerful than we think. Our thoughts, our actions of body, speech, and mind matter, which is why we'll do a little ceremony with the precepts at the close of this. But for right now, I'm just going to read you a story. And you can imagine these past couple of weeks, it's been us. It's been, oh, I know who that person is who's telling the story. Well, in the same way, this rabbit hare is our relative, our Dharma, Sangha, sister, brother too. Once, the Buddha was born as a tender-hearted hare, a rabbit. One day, he and his friends, an otter, a monkey, and a fox. We have a skunk that walked across our porch the other day. Just so we don't think these tales are someplace so far away. I thought, whoa, that's a pretty cute skunk, but we better be careful of this friend that's coming in so close. Anyway, one day the Buddha and his friends, an otter, a monkey, and a fox, decided that once a month they would observe a fast day. And on this day they would give the food that they themselves might have eaten to someone else, someone hungry and in need. The month passes quickly in the forest. Trees bend and shift in the wind. By day, clouds drift across the sun, and at night they race across the moon. Clear streams rush, carrying leaves and twigs and bugs down over the rocks and onto the heavens knows where. Soon another fast day had arrived. It will be good, said the otter to himself, scratching his stomach and fluffing up his wet fur. Slipping into the water, he swam across the shining lake, and there on the other shore he found a fisherman's camp. 7 fish lay on the grass, strung in a row on a stick. Is there anyone here? Called the otter quietly, and there was no answer. Well, these fish must have gotten lost, he decided, and taking the stick firmly between his teeth, he re-entered the water and swam home. Just before he reached the shore, he suddenly remembered the fast day. Someone is going to have a fine feast, he thought sadly, but alas, it's not going to be me. And feeling very righteous, He waddled out of the water, shook himself vigorously, and sat down in the sun to dry his fur and rest. The monkey, too, swinging in the trees, thought of the fast and resolved to be good. He would give his own meal to another. Hunting around, he found beautiful bananas and mangoes. Why couldn't I have found these yesterday? He couldn't help but think. Well, today they shall be given to another, and setting them aside, he too rested in his tree, feeling very righteous indeed. The fox was trotting along, her sharp nose to the wind. Catching the scent of cooked foods, she bounded through the bushes until she came to a farmer's hut. Ho, ho, she thought to herself. What, no one around? Why, look here, someone's left a pot of yogurt on the ground and some bread baking on a spit. Slipping her head through the cord attached to the yogurt pot and taking the spit of bread between her teeth, she trotted off, the plume of her tail waving with delight as she thought of the fine meal that lay ahead. She had not gone far when she remembered the fast day too. See, these animals are not so different than us. People have been telling me about how they get up in the morning and resolve to be a really good bodhisattva and then wonder what happens in the next moment. Anyway, here the fox bodhisattva's tail drooped. Oh, well, she sighed, someone is going to eat well. And then recovering her spirits, she trotted on, feeling very self-righteous indeed. The hare thought, today is the fast day. I'm tired of giving up what grows of its own in the ground, carrots, cabbages, potatoes, and such. I want to give more than that. But what do I have to offer? He thought, and then he leapt up with delight. I have it! This very day I shall offer my own body to someone in need. I shall give myself, give all. Up in the heavens, Chakra's marble throne grew hot, a sign that somewhere on the earth someone was about to undertake a noble deed. Aha, said the king of the gods, a little hare is about to take a big leap. I will test him. In less than an instant, the high god appeared in the hare's forest. Taking the form of an old beggar, he hobbled off, leaning on his staff, to where the otter was resting by the lake shore. Friends, said Chakra, king of the gods, his voice weak and trembling now as if with age, can you spare a little food for me? Of course, said the otter. Sit down right here. Rest. And running to his den, he dragged out 5 of the fish and laid them at the beggar's calloused feet. Eat well, said the otter. Thank you for your kindness, said Chakra, his voice again full of vigor and strength. I may be back for these. And off he went, leaving the astonished otter alone by the shore. And next he came to the monkey. Have you some food for a weary traveler? He asked, extending a shaky hand. Of course. Sit down, chattered the monkey as he scrambled up a tree. And in a moment he returned carrying several bananas and a mango. These are for you. Eat and enjoy them. They are fresh and ripe. Thank you, said Chakra. You are very generous. I may be back for these. And striding off, he left the monkey scratching his head in confusion. And next he approached the fox. Help me, he piteously cried. I am old and very hungry. Have you any food? Of course, yelped the fox. Lucky man, I've got just the thing. And racing off, she returned with a pot of yogurt and the spit of bread, and she threw herself down, grinning and panting, delighted with her own goodness. But to her amazement, the old beggar rose and marched off into the twilight, saying, Thank you, I may be back. And then the god Chakra came to the little hare just as the moon was rising. Friend, he groaned, I have not eaten for many days. The roads have been hard and I am faint. Have you anything that I might eat? I'm suddenly thinking of Afghan refugees and others on the road. Yes, said the hare, I do. Just seat yourself and be patient. For tonight you shall have such a meal as I have never offered before." Gathering leaves and twigs, the little hare started a small blaze on the rocks of the forest floor. And when the fire was burning fiercely, he shook himself to save any fleas that might yet still be on his coat. And then, leaping high, he jumped straight into the flames. But what was this? The fire was cool. It was like ice. Not a hair or pore of his body was even singed. It's not what he thought at all. "Come out of the flames, brave little hare," said a noble voice, and leaping out from the fire again, the little hare found himself facing one of the radiant gods. It was Chakra himself. The old beggar had vanished. "What? What has happened?" exclaimed the little hare in astonishment. "You yourself are the great event that has happened," named Chakra, king of the gods. "Your noble sacrifice shall be remembered for an entire eon. Look." And reaching up with a finger, he drew the hare's picture on the shining disk of the moon. "There, noble hare, you shall not be forgotten for as long as the moon shall shine in the sky. Now come with me and let me show you my home." And bending down, the mighty god lifted the little wide-eyed hare up into his arms, and then soaring upward, they disappeared together into the vastness of the night sky. The forest became very still. The flames of the fire died down. A glowing log popped, shooting up a last burst of sparks. The sparks whirled up, rising higher and higher until they too disappeared, lost at last against the brilliance of the moon and stars. The three friends, the otter, the monkey, and the fox, lived on in harmony. And seated together, they would look up at the moon and remember with amazement the day that the king of the gods himself had walked among them. And he would recall their friend, the little hare, and his great sacrifice. All that was long, long ago. But the hare and the moon shines just as brightly today as he did when Chakra first put him up there. And if you don't believe me, why, just go out some night and look. And there he is, a sign for all to see that compassion is the light that illumines our darkness. My understanding is that if you look at the moon, is that when we look at the moon, we see the old man or the person in the moon. But if you look at the moon from the east, you look up and there's a really clear rabbit in the moon. It's just the other side of the moon. So again, we're not encouraging anybody to throw themselves into fires or to be eaten up by tigers. I was thinking, samsara world, the world that we live in, is sometimes said that it's on fire with the passions. If I want it, I don't want it. I'm good, I'm bad, I'm all of human delusion. So one might say to offer ourselves to the flames is to wholeheartedly give ourselves moment after moment as best we can to bodhisattva vow of living with and for all beings. Sometimes we'll be fox, sometimes we'll be otter, sometimes we'll be skunk, sometimes we'll be rabbit. But we all help and inspire each other with how can I be of help? What's the appropriate response in this moment? There's a monk poet, Ryokan, beautiful poetry. Maybe we should study Ryokan sometimes. And he wrote a beautiful and tender verse version of this Jataka. He says, because in the version that he knew, the rabbit died in the fire. He says, "From that time till now, the story's been told. This tale of how the rabbit came to be in the moon, and even I, when I hear it, find the tears soaking the sleeves of my robe. Even I, when I hear it, find the tears soaking the sleeve of my robe. So I thought of these past weeks when people have been telling their stories, and there have been tears soaking our robes, sometimes running down our cheeks, sometimes being moved by the sacrifices, the beauty, the tenderness, and the love in each person's story. So the heart of the Bodhisattva vow is, as it's passed to us in the Zen tradition, is through the precepts, the Bodhisattva precepts. And what you do is you start with, many of you know this, but I love doing it and saying it anyway, over and over, is you start with a verse of renunciation, which basically you say, just like in the Jatakas, I am a Bodhisattva waking up to be a Buddha, and boy, I've made some mistakes along the way. Boy, I am on a learning curve. I'm going to keep doing this forever. I don't know why that came. Maybe I thought that's how a hare talked or somebody. I don't know. There's no end to this. And there's nothing wrong in any of this. It's just please use whatever life is giving us to wake up. That's what it's all about. That's really to wake up to a heart of compassion and goodness. And then you call in all the bodhisattvas to help you because you know you couldn't possibly do it alone. So you call in the big bodhisattvas, Manjushri and Samantabhadra and Kuan Yin, but in this case, we know you also call in skunk and otter and rabbit and blue bear and crow and confused you and confused human beings. And you say, please help me. I can't do this by myself. I know there is nothing that I could ever do by myself, but it sure feels like it's me and I'm all by myself. But would you all please just like keep reminding me and helping me? And then you say the Bodhisattva precepts with a full heart, knowing they're impossible, knowing they're impossible. But we've also lived long enough to know that life is impossible. In case you hadn't noticed, it's not going to cooperate with our agenda. And if you can get it tied down for even an instant, it'll pop up someplace else. So here's what I thought we'd do. In a minute, Debbie's going to put it on screen share. And we'll say the verse of renunciation, of sometimes it's called repentance, not because you're bad, but just of confession, I'm a human being. We'll say it 3 times. And then we'll say the precepts together. And while we're saying them, please pay attention to one that touches your heart that's come forward during this time, or maybe today you can be surprised. What's the precept that touches the tender heart of love and sadness and goodness in you? And then we'll come back together and I'll tell you what's next. Okay? So here we go. I think the way we'll do this is we'll say the first verse together 3 times. And then I'll say 16 Bodhisattva precepts, the refuges, and then I'll say it, and then you can each repeat it in your own home. And again, this isn't rote. These are alive words. So See what moves in you. And we'll do that with each one. All my ancient twisted karma, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. All my ancient twisted karma, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. All my ancient twisted karma, from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, born through body, speech, and mind, I now fully avow. The 16 Bodhisattva precepts, refuges. I take refuge in Buddha, the principle of enlightenment within. Now you. I take refuge in Buddha, the principle of enlightenment within. I take refuge in Dharma, the enlightened way of understanding and living. I take refuge in Dharma, the enlightened way of understanding and living. I take refuge in Sangha, the community of beings. I take refuge in Sangha, the community of beings. The 3 pure precepts. I vow to avoid all action that creates suffering. I vow to avoid all action that creates suffering. I vow to do all action that creates true happiness. I vow to do all action that creates true happiness. I vow to act with others always in mind. I vow to act with others always in mind. The clear mind precepts. Not to kill, but to nurture life. Not to kill, but to nurture life. Not to steal, but to receive what is offered as a gift. Not to steal, but to receive what is offered as a gift. Not to misuse sexuality, but to be caring and faithful in intimate relationships. Not to misuse sexuality, but to be caring and faithful in intimate relationships. Not to lie, but to be truthful. Not to lie, but but to be truthful. Not to intoxicate with substance or doctrines, but to promote clarity and awareness. Not to intoxicate with substance or doctrines, but to promote clarity and awareness. Not to speak of others' faults, but to speak out of loving kindness. Not to speak of others' faults, but to speak out of loving kindness. Not to praise self at the expense of others, but to be modest. Not to praise self at the expense of others, but to be modest. Not to be possessive of anything, but to be generous. Not to be possessive of anything, but to be generous. Not to harbor anger, but to forgive. Not to harbor anger, but to forgive. Not to do anything to diminish the triple treasure, but to support and nurture it. Not to do anything to diminish the triple treasure, but to support and nurture it. Why don't you put it back up for a minute, Debbie, if you can or would. Let's just take a minute. Because the language may be specific to what's here, or it may be just what arises in your heart. What wholeheartedly arises in your heart as you contemplate these full moon bodhisattva precepts? Just take a minute here. Okay, let's come back. So we can unshare the screen, Debbie. So I'm going to put us in small groups. Probably be groups of 3 or 4.